All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Simon Tatum, and I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. And I'm very happy to be here speaking with our panelists and to celebrate World Barbershop Day. I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion about barbershops and the cultures that surround them. And before we go any further, we want to share a short video contribution from Steve Gills, a celebrity barber and the owner of the Director's Cut Barbershop. Steve could not be here this evening to participate in the panel discussion, but he had some thoughts that he wanted to share with us regarding barbershop culture. So we're just going to play a short video for you and watch it, and then we'll begin with our discussion.
Good day to everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Cynthia Gillis. I was born and raised in the East Flatbush section of Brooklyn, New York. I am a barber, first and foremost, and now I'm working in the entertainment industry with talents like Anthony Mackie, Michael K. Williams, Idris Elba, and currently Jonathan Majors. I'm in London, UK, working on a project with Jonathan, which is the reason I'm not physically there with you all for this panel exhibition. Being a barber means a lot to me, not just in my community, but for the culture as well. You see, Black barbers have been around since ancient Egypt, and in Egypt, barbers were prosperous and highly respected. That changed in America by the 19th century during slavery. Slave masters profited by leasing Black barbers to their neighbors and local businesses to groom white men. Black-owned barbershops were run by slaves, and it was difficult for a Black man to visit a Black barber just to get a haircut. This was due to economic reasons, mainly because of Black barbers' financial stability relied on white men being a patron. It wasn't until the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 that Black barbers started opening barbershops in the Black communities. It is then that wealth and opportunities arose, and in the 20th century, a man named Alonzo Herndon became the first Black barber to become a millionaire since opening his own and two more barbershops in 1904. Till this day, barbershops play a vital role in Black culture and economical development in the Black community. Which is why I'm happy to celebrate World Barbers Day today. World Barbers Day to me is a celebration of all that we as barbers in our community have accomplished. We give back to our community every day with these gifted hands. A little history about me is that I'm originally an artist. My major in high school and college was graphic design, in which I later changed to computer graphics with a minor in photography. Being an artist is what convinced me into becoming a barber. Aside from the obvious of making money at your leisure, my confirmation was convincing myself that what I can do on paper with my imagination, I can do on a person's head as my canvas. From artists like Ernie Barnes, whose Sugar Shack painting has been on the sitcom Good Times, and Marvin Gaye's I Want You album cover art, using Black culture and hair as a muse, to Kehinde Wiley, doing the same in present times with his portrait of Obama and his exhibition on Economy of Grace. It was influencing and inspiring to know that what I'm doing, it's not that far off. Nowadays, the barbershop experience is that of convenience and not necessity. In everything in life, you have love and you have lust. Those who lust to barber only barber for what they can take, financial gain, and not what they can contribute. And for those who love to barber, they take pride in making a person feel confident to take on the world. I love barbering, which is why I sought out to do something different with it, to bring the love back. the respect for the profession. So I provide a customer experience like no other. And it's not a secret. It's actually simple. Treat others the way you want to be treated. You'll realize in the service field that everyone wants the same thing. Your attention to detail. My slogan stands by that. It's not just a cut, it's an experience. In other words, your talent gets you noticed, but it's your work ethic and consistency that opens doors for you and keeps them open. So for any up and coming barbers, or even those who never thought about barbering until now, I say to you, give your community a facelift. Use your gifted hands to uplift the confidence of your community and take heed at how we invest in each other by loving what we do and not lusting for what we may gain. In closing, I would like to welcome you all to the exhibition, Textures, the history and art of black hair. I'm really excited for this conversation as we celebrate World Barbers Day. I would also like to thank your co-curators, Dr. Tamika Ellington, Dr. Joseph Underwood, and Jonathan Square for this opportunity to speak on my passion. Thank you all for your time. Enjoy the exhibition. Peace.
All right, thank you very much, Steve, for that contribution, and we'll keep those thoughts in mind as we go forward. Welcome again, everyone. As I said earlier, my name is Simon Tatum, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight for this panel discussion. This discussion is one of several events that are being promoted through the Textures exhibition, currently on view at Kent State University. Moreover, the discussion covers a unique topic within the scope of the exhibition because it focuses on Black hair specifically through male perspectives. We believe that this discussion will bring forward some minority viewpoints within the exhibition, since the exhibition is strongly framed around many amazing women artists, women creatives, and has discussions about the care of women's hair. As a male artist who was born and raised in the Caribbean, I'm no stranger to barbershops and to barbershop culture. I have many vivid memories from my childhood and adolescence that involve a trip to the barbershop. I remember the moments of going to a barber to get a shape up, which is a Jamaican term for a quick trim. I would get shape up before important school events, before a birthday, or before an important holiday gathering. I remember the barbershop being a loud atmosphere within Grand Cayman. I have many loud memories associated with music playing on the stereo in barbershops, things like Jamaican dancehall, reggaeton, or American hip hop. I also have loud memories of the crowds of people who would gather in barbershops because the barber would not take reservations. He would only give people haircuts if they came to the shop and asked for one. His walk-in policy would lead to a variety of men and boys waiting within the shop. Men who were out from work on their lunch breaks, boys who were coming into the shop after school. And these crowds of men and boys would engage in an atmosphere of laughter, shouting, and many, many lively conversations. So with that said, as we begin our discussion, I would like for us to think about the title of this event, A Cut Above, Barbershops and Belonging. This title easily sets up our discussion around the idea of barbershops being activity points for various communities. It also makes us think about these shops as complicated spaces of belonging, community building, and self-exploration. Considering the list of contributors for our panel discussion tonight, I think it would be a good idea for us to provoke conversation around what traditional barber shops can look like and what traditional culture can look like within the US. I would also like each of us to think about the connotations of barbershop culture, connotations around what types of experiences can be expected within these shops and which types of people can participate in them. I would also like each of us to think about how barbershop culture either provides or rejects hair care services for males based on their race, sexual identity, and class. And lastly, I would like for us to think about how barbershop culture can transform with changing social norms, especially if barbershops continue to serve diverse communities within the US. I want to remind everybody who's listening into our discussion tonight that we will have an opportunity for question and answers at the end of the discussion. So if you hear anything interesting tonight while we're going through the discussion and you think of any questions, please jot them down and maybe add them to the Q&A section, and we will review them towards the end of the talk. All right, so I'm looking forward to speaking towards many ideas tonight. And without any further notes from me, I'm going to introduce our panelists. First, we have Devin Shimoyama, who was born in Philadelphia, and he received his MFA from Yale University School of Art for painting and printmaking in 2014. And he is currently on the faculty of the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Shimoyama has exhibited throughout the United States and internationally, and his debut solo museum exhibition at the Andy Warhol Museum explored depictions of Black queer male bodies, including how they navigate barbershop culture. Our second panelist, Kadeem Woodson, is a businessman and an owner of the newly opened Enkel's Barbershop in Brooklyn. Based on his own experiences with hypermasculine barbershops and witnessing discrimination, his shop is designed as an inclusive space for everyone, whether they're queer or not. All right, and with that said, we'll begin our discussion. So the first question that I have tonight is going to be for Kadeem. And Kadeem, I was wondering if you could tell us, and if you could speak about your past experiences with barbershops in your local community.
Hey guys, hello, can everyone hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. So my experience in barbershops, pretty much kind of like a roller coaster. I've had other barbers, other barbershop experiences, but I mainly stuck with my barber from the time I was 3 years old. I've known him all my life. So me and his rapport is pretty well. I love him, he loves me, he's pretty much like family, but the barbershop experience just doesn't kind of change because I know him so well, he knows me so well. That those customers are still there, the rhetoric is still there, and the language is still there. And you still get those weird looks when you walk into a barbershop. And you just kind of feel a little bit alienated, even if they aren't trying. For the most part, I would say it's unintentional, but it still feels, all the same as far as, feeling alienated or feeling separate from everyone else. Turns out that in that barbershop, my father is pretty popular. He used to play basketball, pretty popular basketball player. Especially within Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy. So everyone knows him. So I would get treated weird until they found out that that was my father. And it was just weird that everyone wanted to treat me nicely once they found out that my father was this, beloved basketball player. But when I'm just this gay Black guy that's just walking into a shop, it's not pretty much the same. So it just says a lot as far as when people feel like they can relate to you in any way. That's when they treat you with respect, I should say. And when they don't feel like they can relate to you at all, that's when, you're kind of alienated. So that's pretty much been my my experience in the barbershop, whether it is my main barbershop or just a one-time cut. It's always pretty uncomfortable, and you always have to hear some words that cut pretty deep for the most part.
That's really interesting, Kadeem. And I was also wondering if you kind of talk about, with your past experiences and growing up around barbershops, could you speak maybe about like the group interactions and the discussions that would typically happen within your local barbershop? And maybe you can also tell us about the conversations that you want to promote through your barbershop that you currently are running.
Well, normally there's pretty much a lot of misogynistic views, homophobic views, transphobic views, and it's pretty much stated pretty blatantly. You just always have to hear things of just very triggering conversations. A lot of times mental illness is kind of talked down upon, therapists, and, they don't believe in this or that. So it's just definitely all kinds of ignorant views. slurs and all of these things, they're, commonly said and no one kind of blinks an eye. So you kind of hear things like that repeatedly. It's almost guaranteed that you'll hear it, especially in the Bed-Stuy area, which my shop is located in. So the conversation that I kind of want to change it to, which is more of a healthy conversation, more of an actual brotherhood, which is what I believe barbershops are supposed to be. Tearing no one down, and anyone that walks in my shop, I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to, just feel at ease. I'm very strategic about everything that I place in the shop, down to candles and scents, just to create a relaxing vibe, playing the right music that makes makes everyone feel just more comfortable and everything like that. So really it's just about relaxing, and any conversation, anything that may be on your mind, go for it, say it, we can still have those, pushing, edgeworthy conversations. It's fine. But as long as everyone's respected and, we're still, respecting everyone's pronouns, thoughts, outlooks on life. We're all different, but I think that that's the beauty of Enkel's Barbershop, is that we celebrate the fact that we're all different instead of alienating people.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Absolutely. And with your barbershop, and I guess also thinking about your past experiences, do you believe that the barbershops you went around really affected your ideas about self-care and your self-identity? And do you think about that with like your clients now that you're serving in your barbershop, like how you influence them with these things?
I think about it daily. Every time someone walks in the shop now, I just remember how I felt walking into another barbershop. And as far as self-care, I think that's what you're asking. Correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty much before, I felt like I couldn't really indulge in like the self-care experience because it was such a rushed experience then. I had to go in, rush and get out. And then, it was always like, oh, let me go get my hair cut, and then let me just rush to go out or wherever I'm going to after. It was really just because I was going out. Now, it is my barbershop. I get my haircut just because I want to relax, because I want to feel better. So the self-care experience, it's definitely changed. My skincare routine is better. I care more, all of these things. And one thing I learned through my friend who's a nutritionist, she, as far as self-care goes, she definitely encouraged me to not rush when I'm going out or when I'm going anywhere, and even in the morning, because your day just goes a lot more smoothly. So that's definitely been a part of my experience, and my self-care kind of regimen and routine has definitely changed with this barbershop. And, we literally have a bunch of self-care products here: body butters, purge mask, face oils, all kinds of things, soaps. I'm kind of looking right now, room sprays, candles, all of that. So just all things that make you feel at home, pretty much.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of those things added on top of the regular haircut just kind of make you feel like you're glowing when you leave the place, right? That's so awesome. Devin, I'm going to ask a question to you next as we're going forward. I was wondering if you could speak about your ideas around how barbershop culture maybe isn't as inclusive as we think it can be. And I was also going to ask you, we think about boys growing up around barbershops or being, a site of congregation or conversation for men. But, do barbershops hold true across race, class, and sexual identity? Because you speak about this within your work.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, as far as barbershops and inclusivity goes, I grew up in Philadelphia. And since a young child, I would immediately feel discomfort in those types of spaces, not just barbershops, but they tended to be this place that sort of presents itself as a place of male fraternal bonding between Black men. But, I was raised by a household, mostly full of women, and my mother would take me to go get my hair cut, and that was my first kind of interaction or understanding or digesting of like, I feel uncomfortable because I can see that she feels uncomfortable. So, you know, barbershops being this kind of also misogynistic space, they also have like, they're often positioned kind of next door or close by beauty shops, and they have this kind of like gender split between these types of spaces, but some overlap in terms of community somewhat. But yeah, historically, barbershops being this place where people would convene to discuss, you know, how to take action in a political way, or even just to have kind of a place to decompress and be around other men and kind of bond. And, you know, I never really think of that space as being much of that anymore in the same capacity. It seems to be limited to a certain type of Black masculinity. You know, I have friends that are that identify as women who also want to get a shape up and look great and have a fade, but have been turned away from certain types of spaces just because of the way that they present themselves, maybe too femme or too, you know, butch or whatever. You know, there's so many different reasons why, and if not directly verbally turned away, have been sort of presented with a kind of immediate discomfort in the air. It's like thick in the air in those spaces sometimes. And I had conversations with friends of mine that actually inspired an entire body of work that I made all of these portraits of Black boys crying in the barbershop. I was talking to two of my friends who identify similar to me, Black queer men, that it was just a funny moment where one of us had to go get a haircut and they were dreading having to go, and what he described was to sort of like go back into the closet for a half hour and then you know, be able to leave. And it's this like, it's this very real thing to get, you know, because getting a haircut is this like incredibly intimate experience. I mean, you're this close with somebody touching you and caring and tending to you and having a conversation. There's a lot of small talk, a lot of trust that needs to be sort of given and received on both ends. And I think that you know, queerness or sort of any kind of rupture to their kind of day-to-day and what they're used to as a barber in that position of like tending to or caring for, that rupture that occurs when something is not as it normally is for them. If somebody is presenting a little too femme or they aren't having the kind of same jargon that you're you know, discussing in that space, I think there's a lot of different ways. I mean, I grew up, you know, I speak too properly sometimes or whatever for some people. And it's like, there's a lot of reasons why people might feel uncomfortable. So, you know, a lot of times I would go into a barbershop and be like, how can I stay as silent as possible to not out myself as queer or out myself as being from a mostly white neighborhood or like whatever, you know, just so I can receive this haircut and not have to like have anybody feel uncomfortable except for me. And then I realized I was like, I'm bottling all of this up. And yeah, so I do think that those spaces can cultivate a certain kind of masculinity that's that sort of endorses misogyny, homophobia, and all of these things in even subtle ways. I think about it in terms of like, it's not just like, oh, they don't have a statement on their door that tells me that it's safe for you here. It's not just that kind of thing. I mean, it's what they're watching on TV. In there, it's you know, if I go into a barbershop and they're watching like vintage Eddie Murphy stand up, like that's not the most welcoming to me. I certainly don't feel comfortable with some of the things that are being said in there that are being laughed at. And so, you know, I think about that. I think about the way that they speak to women when they enter those spaces, the way they speak about them as soon as they leave those spaces. It feels like a level of unprofessionalism a lot of the time when I go in there, and it has nothing to do. It just seems like bad business at the end of the day sometimes.
Yeah. And I was wondering with you now, Devin, I mean, I guess with you thinking about these moments and also kind of critiquing it, you have like the critique within the work. And I do want to give you a moment, or I guess a moment coming up to kind of share your screen and show some examples of this work, because it's so much different for you to kind of talk through and show us some examples versus just speaking about the paintings, because they have so much strengths in their presentation. But I've also was wondering about if you have a critique outside of the work now within sort of your moment. Do you feel like when you see these moments of prejudice that you feel a bit more vocal now as a person to speak out about them, or?
Yeah, it's interesting in general having made that work, because I think what I wanted to do initially when making that work was to sort of have it be a much more interactive experience of even like finding the people that I was going to be painting. And I wanted to go into barbershops and talk to people about this. And to be honest and totally frank, most of those people that I represent in those paintings are fictional, and that's because of my own actual deep-seated discomfort of being in that type of space and having those types of conversations. I tried to actually engage with a barber for a discussion, kind of like this panel that we're talking about, to talk with me about these types of spaces. And in Pittsburgh here during the run of my show Crybaby at the Warhol Museum a couple of years ago, and they said no. I was turned away by a couple of people. They didn't want to talk about this stuff. And I think they are, a lot of people feel like very protective of these types of spaces and the types of energy that they cultivate in there. And I understand also the other side of it is, it's so, this certain presentation of masculinity, a lot of the time, Black masculinity can be a sort of protective device that helps people navigate through the world in a way that I think is really also important. Learning how to be a man in a certain way affords you a lot of benefits in a lot of ways. So I also kind of sympathize with it, and I find it to be a difficult topic to approach. So so I have a lot of critiques of it personally, but I also can see why it's not so comfortable or so easy to even engage in this type of dialogue in a lot of places, in most places. I mean, I think, Kadeem, I think your shop sounds amazing, but you're in New York, and like I think there's a lot more variety there. I think people are also more comfortable being authentically themselves a lot of the time, more so disproportionately than somewhere like Pittsburgh, where you step 2 seconds outside of this 30-minute like radius and you're in a kind of dangerous zone for a lot of other reasons other than being uncomfortable at a barbershop. So yeah, I think that there's still a lot of these conversations just need to happen more and more. I don't know. It is a layered, complicated thing.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. I mean, because then your paintings kind of become the imaginary, and they can kind of become the conversation starter for these discussions, right? And I was wondering now if you wanted to share some of the pictures of the paintings from the Crybaby series.
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'll share this one presentation that I have, and it's actually of an installation that I did a few years ago with Cultural DC. And so essentially what I wanted to do was kind of take you inside of one of my paintings. And so this is just to give you a really quick overview, but I'm going to go back a few images. So a lot of the works that I made within this barbershop series of paintings are these seated portraits of fictional individuals receiving haircuts. You never see the barber. And generally speaking, the sitter is crying. I always thought of this as being an opportunity to kind of present a fictitious idea of what I would dream like a barbershop could be, is actually this space of safety where people could feel that they could decompress and fully kind of rid themselves of this idea or notion of Black masculinity that has to be this kind of hardened exterior, and allowing people to kind of feel and emote. And I think it's funny, right after making this work, I think maybe not this specific work, but this body of work, Moonlight came out, and I thought that was a really huge deal. I mean, to see a Black man crying on screen and then that motion picture winning at the Academy is like a pretty major step forward in a lot of ways. And also, I mean, I don't know how much of an impact it had, or how many people from the Black community, how many Black men that identify as perhaps straight saw that movie. I don't know, but like I think just the fact that it's out there and people are having discussions more is huge. But basically what I wanted to do from this series of works was to kind of take these decorative elements that I often use and associate with queerness, with crafting, with femininity. A lot of the time, a lot of like costume jewelry that's in this, a lot of collage elements, patterns, sequins, things you might see a drag queen wearing, and embellishing the space. I wanted to make it into a real space, and that engaged an actual community, and Cultural DC helped me to bring that to life in this project that I titled Mighty Mighty, the Barbershop project. I collaborated with with Kelly Gorsuch, who runs and owns really beautiful barbershops and hair salons in DC, as well as in Virginia. And he helped me to sort of figure out exactly what's needed in this space to actually have a fully functioning barbershop. We had a team install all of this work. I worked with a furniture designer, Caleb Woodard, who helped with all the furniture in there. That's like custom, really nice wood furniture that I wish I could have in my house, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then yeah, fully aestheticized the space and had a fully functioning barbershop that offered free haircuts to mostly children in the community of Anacostia in Washington, DC, for the duration of the summer for the most part and into a little bit of the fall. And yeah, it was a really great opportunity for people to actually directly engage in kind of difficult conversations. A lot of the barbers that were tending to people during the day were who are either allies of the LGBTQI community or a part of that community themselves. We were able to bring in some people from Lady Clipper, which were really generous to, offer haircuts. Lady Clipper is a DC-based barbershop that's all women run, and so to have women in there talking about tough topics about queerness, if people have questions, kids want to know, all kinds of stuff. What is this made of? From the event actually, but yeah, it was just a really great opportunity for me to kind of bring all of this maybe more passive work to life in a way that actually engages with the community. And there are some videos of one of the barbershops who is a trans man who was cutting hair for quite a while during the run of this exhibition in there, and he talks about some of the conversations that he had, and not all the time did it end in a happy way. I mean, I think it ended more often than not in a very respectful way, and people were able to have difficult discussions and disagree and be fine with that at the end of the day. But I do think it was an interesting opportunity, I think, for people to be in that type of space and ask really curious questions about gender identity, queerness, and things like that, having kids ask these things, receiving haircuts with their parents right there. And so yeah, I wouldn't say that this was a flawless project that went seamlessly and people were happy at the end of it all across the board. But I would say that at the end of the run of the show, when we closed it down, people wished that they could still get free haircuts. So at least, they didn't mind that aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And just the fact that people are making people realize they don't have to agree on all these points either, but everybody's still having their own opinion, but learning from each other and creating that sort of discussion space. That's absolutely amazing. And Devin, I'm curious, I mean, gosh, this must have been such an interesting sort of research project as well. And I was wondering if there was any sort of takeaway moments from this that really are helping you with current projects you're working on, or as future projects you have in mind.
Yeah, this I mean, for one, I was really fortunate to be able to even do this. It is not cheap, and it is very hard to put something like this on. It requires a lot of help and a lot of people, and so I'd love to do more socially engaged work like this, but it is a bigger production, I'll be honest. But I do think a lot of the times what I learned was so much about the art world, and especially me being predominantly a painter, I'm engaging with the art world in more elitist circles, and a lot of the time the people that are engaging with my work and seeing it out in real time are people who feel like they can enter museum spaces or gallery spaces and are able to decode and talk about certain things that I think most people, even my own family, is not engaged with the art world that deeply. And so this provided an opportunity to bring art to this community specifically that, they live in DC, but more often than not, most of these people do not make the trek across town to go see all of the free Smithsonian exhibitions. And so this was an opportunity to engage directly with those people and speak with them about some of the questions that they might have or whatever. I think it was, for me, it felt very much like being at home in a lot of different ways, and thinking about how art can and should, I think, more often than not engage with communities in which we're discussing, instead of just sort of making work about those things and then just spinning it out into this kind of very limited community or audience. And so, yeah, this is something that I want to do more of. And I dream to do more of it. We want to bring this project back to life in other iterations. It still exists, all of the stuff. It's just sort of like in storage right now. And it's something that the pandemic kind of put a halt to. We do want to bring this to other cities. I would love to just bring this specific project to other places. I think it does matter, the communities in which it's engaging with. And for me, what was really important was actually learning about this community specifically, not just blanket statement Black neighborhood, but like I didn't grow up in a neighborhood like this one specifically. So it was really nice to be able to bring in community leaders, people who, you know, people in this neighborhood down the street actually know and see all the time and trust, and like talk with them about like, you know, what do they want to see and what kind of conversations are they wanting to have, and like how can I engage with this community. So for me, there was a lot of learning to do on my part for sure, and certainly for Cultural DC in general, that organization.
Okay, excellent. And I do want to open up the discussion and ask a question for both of you now, for both Devin and Kadeem, because I think you both have slightly touched on this. But I was wondering if you all could talk about like how you all visualize barbershops should transform for our future communities, for them to continue to be more inclusive for queer culture, and maybe for people of different classes as well, right? And I was wondering if maybe both of you all could just say like specific examples of things you think can happen.
Can you like make that a more concise question? Sorry, I got a little.
Sure. I guess I just want to know basically just one detail from you or one idea from you specifically about how you think barbershops can transform to be more inclusive to diverse communities.
Okay, yeah, no, that's helpful. And maybe this even a little bit relates to this question that's in the chat a bit, but maybe we'll get to that later. But I do feel like one thing that I was learning while being there was that it might be important for barbershops or spaces like this to have a kind of pledge that's available and outward facing for potential customers to enter that space before they go in there. That's something that their employees take very seriously. And I think that something like that, like whenever I've seen something like that, which is very rare, maybe it's more common in larger cities, but you know, I immediately feel like, oh, I could go here. These people actually seem to care about not just, you know, the people that they're regulars, they're open to all kinds of people and want to cultivate a space in which they are abiding by this pledge that they're stating on their door, like this is what we stand for. I do think that would be really great to see more of. And I also think in general, and this goes for all kinds of barbershops, not just Black barbershops, but I think people need to know how to cut all kinds of hair. And I really do. Like I went to Penn State, which is in central Pennsylvania for undergrad, and I could not get a haircut in town unless I like got it cut from somebody that just like does cut hair in town that is Black. So which is incredibly embarrassing to walk into a place of business to get done the thing that they do and to be the only one told that, oh, we don't cut textured hair. And I'm like, what are the textures that you cut? And then, you know, like feeling very very confrontational suddenly and protective of myself. And like, so I learned how to cut my own hair. And so I think that it's important for all types of barbershops to learn how to cut all kinds of hair. I've also seen the inverse of that, of like white people who have difficult hair or like, you know, have curly hair naturally. And it's like really cool. And they maybe don't necessarily get the warmest of welcomes in Black barbershops. But, you know, like, I think that everybody needs to know how to cut all different kinds of hair. I think that's just like necessary and would be greatly beneficial for business in general. That's my read.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. That's so funny. I feel like growing up in the Caribbean, there was this sort of trend that they would have like a list of pictures or examples up on the wall of like, you can get these 5 types of cuts, and we're not really going to consider what your hair is. You knew what you wanted when you came in. You can get one of these 5 and just choose it, and we'll see what happens. So I think people being a bit more, open to all different types of hair. I think that's awesome. Yeah, and Kadeem, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this question as well, just thinking about maybe a specific example or specific detail that we can do to make barbershops more inclusive to diverse communities in the future?
I think it's all about because as a queer Black man myself, I think one of the most beautiful things and the most comforting things is talking with people that differ from you. They are from a different walk of life, but just kind of seeing where you do relate, because I think regardless, we all do relate at some point. We may like the same shows. We may have grown up with the same, type of mother. I think in conversation, I think it's just really important. Like conversation, period. It's important. A lot of times you walk into these barbershops, and when you do differ from, what the mass majority is in that barbershop, you're not really spoken to too much. And when you are spoken to, it's pretty much about something that you can't relate to. I think that people just need to, one, learn to read the room as a whole, and two, just learn to have conversations with all different types of people, and ask questions, not invading questions, but ask questions and just have open conversation with people. If you don't understand something, ask. If I think we all lead each other, and I think that is like sort of the answer, is just kind of talking and conversation wise, and again reading the room, because it's extremely important to read the room and understand what the room is saying to you.
Sure.
So I think that's what I would say, just conversation, working on your conversation with people who may not be like you.
Yeah. And Kadeem, do you feel like with your shop specifically that you've seen a more inclusive or more diverse crowd coming to you? And do you feel like that's been really valuable, like kind of comparing the crowd that you're collecting versus what you saw in traditional barbershops growing up?
For sure. I think it's so amazing. I believe Devin said something earlier. Did he pronounce your name Devin, right?
Yes.
He said something earlier, and it's just like, when you used to go before, it was always this thing of, oh, I probably shouldn't wear this. Maybe I'll just wear some basketball shorts and a t-shirt, so I can blend in. You kind of always want to blend in, just to avoid those looks. And I do notice that my customers come in whatever. They come in fully dressed. They come in, as loud as they want to be, as quiet as they want to be, whatever it is. I have all different walks of life coming in here. Even my heterosexual clients, they still seem a lot more comfortable than they do. And they've said this to me, they are more comfortable here than, in their local barbershops. Because I think just like us, they get tired of it too. That same old conversation. It gets tiring. And I do see like people from all walks of life, and that's one of the things I'm most comfortable. I'm most like happy with is how everyone looks so comfortable here. And it's like such a diversity. Someone who works for MTA, the train system here in New York, versus someone who's like just a freelance artist, just having a conversation with each other. They're very different, but they're all here, and diversity is what really makes the shop beautiful. So yeah, of course, yes.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
I would say really quickly, because like there, just in relationship to that one question in the chat about sort of like speaking to the duality of like, how do you navigate the duality of like, being a person who's not a person of color going to a Black barber shop to get a better haircut because of your hair or whatever. I think, honestly, like you're probably going to, like what Kadeem was saying is sort of building a kind of rapport with the person, I think is a really good way to navigate that. If you go in there or you talk to them on the phone, or you see, or, your initial vibes are not feeling good and you're not able to click, maybe that's not the place for you. But I do find that what I would personally, when I would see a barbershop that had even one female barber, or like or one barber that's maybe, I don't know, Latino or something, like something else, like that's not just sort of everybody look like they're just like homeboys hanging out, and like I think that would give me at least one sign that I'm like, okay, there's a drop of something else in here. Maybe I can you know, feel a little more comfortable. And so sometimes that would be a way for me to, that would be like a sign that I would feel perhaps more easily sort of adapting into that space or something and not feeling weird.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to go through now that we've started including some of the questions and answers from the group chat. I just want to go through and maybe read out some more of those questions so that we can get more people who are watching involved. So this question coming from Davin Ebanks to all panelists. I think, so I'll just try and summarize it. And he just says that, you know, if Barbershops is place, which is, you know, mostly being described as a culturally essential space, you know, where does that leave you? So, I think we've just gone through that question actually about the non-white typical hair or for a non-white typical person. But I guess this is kind of what Devin, you're just addressing, but the question is just kind of what it's trying to ask is just about people who are not fitting within, I guess, the typical roles that a barbershop might serve. If they're kind of not the typical, what we can do to make them feel more included and not kind of exclude the fitting within the specific molds that the barbershop wants them to fit into. Hold on just a moment. Pardon me for just a moment. Just having some technical difficulties. Hold on for just a moment. Okay, so the next question I have is from one of our co-curators, Dr. Tamika Ellington. She's asking, so if it is the barbershop's responsibility to set the mood or the tone in the shop, you know, and should they be regulating how their clients are treated by other barbers and clients? You know, this is something that can be taught within, do we think that this is something that can be taught within barber school? And maybe this would be a good one for you, Kadeem. Do you think that barbers should now be taught how to deal with people's moods and tones? And do you think that it would be good to kind of go all the way back to the education system for barbers that they're thinking about, or we can kind of inject ideas of them being more inclusive if they want to be more inclusive within their shops? And maybe, go ahead, Kadeem.
Sorry. So I do think I think it should definitely be brought up while in barber school. It should be, you know, at least something that they touch on for a day, for a week. However, I will say I'm not exactly sure that that is something that can be taught. I think this is something that is more so kind of a walk of life, kind of something that, because what's happening here is you can't, if let's say you're the owner or the barber or both or whatever it may be, you have to know that something is wrong in order to kind of regulate that. If you don't think nothing is wrong with what's going on, it will be normal. And that is what I'm seeing in a lot of barbershop, especially in Brooklyn. They don't exactly know that anything wrong is happening. They, you know, they're in their element, just like the clients for the most part, and their barber. They don't necessarily know that anything is wrong. So I think, again, I think it's all about conversation. And within conversation, you kind of learn like, oh, wow, that's offensive. Oh, wow, maybe we shouldn't talk about this with someone who can potentially be triggered by this conversation. I'm just really not sure. I think it should be brought up in barber school just so, you know, it's in the mental and it is something that you can revert back to once the conversation does happen. But, you know, it's really not, I can't really even think of a real curriculum or, you know, handbook to like really, you know, navigate that. It's really a difficult thing. Unfortunately, especially as Black people, we weren't necessarily given the tools to kind of understand our diversity. we were taught one thing and it was kind of this, you are this, and everything else is kind of awkward, odd, or unorthodox. So we just kind of have to work with what we have. So I don't know. That's what I think.
Okay.
Kind of a hard thing to
Yeah.
solve.
Yeah, but having these things in mind from earlier on when people are first starting these businesses, or if they want to engage in this way of being more inclusive, I think that you're right, that we should, that these are ideas that people can take on from the beginning as they start to kind of manifest these new businesses and begin these new businesses. I just wanted to go back to kind of conclude and just to reread and respond to part of Davin Ebanks' question from earlier. And so I'm just going to read this out. So now that I'm in the US and I've moved to, cutting my own hair because I can't get a decent haircut at, one of the chain stores like Supercut. So this is something that Davin was saying earlier. Nor do I feel comfortable going to Black barbershops. Could you give advice on how to navigate that duality of feeling like you're in between, that you're not fitting into any of the spaces that are currently being offered? Because he has this feeling of being kind of stuck in between because he's not a non-white typical textured hair person. And I was thinking that maybe you all could just give some ideas to Davin about things that you would suggest that don't fit in within these typical molds, since both of you, I guess, have also navigated the same thing of not feeling like you fit within the traditional barbershop mold, but that you wanted to create an alternate option.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of what I was saying earlier, was like asking around. I mean, if you see anybody that has like that isn't obviously Black and has like a great haircut, asking them where they get their haircut, and or what I would do is, yeah, any queer person in whatever city I'm in, if they have a great haircut, I'm like, who's your barber? Like I want to know
Yeah.
where do they go, because I think that's like, it's an important question. And so yeah, usually I ask other people who identify similarly to me or look kind of like they have a similar hair texture, and I'm in a weird place and I'm like, oh, how does this person have a nice haircut? Like, something's going on, so I want to know. And so you can connect to them on that sort of mutual understanding. So that's one way to do it. And like I said earlier, like whenever I see a barbershop that's predominantly men, and if there's even one woman or something like that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be a space in which I probably could feel more comfortable, because if that woman is working in here and she feels comfortable, then I feel like that's a step in the right direction. So I don't know, like there's other little signifiers like that I noticed, at least.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to touch on that. I think it's super important. I think haircuts are just like clothes in a sense. See somebody with a really nice shirt on and you just ask them like, hey, where'd you get this from? As far as women barbers, I have tried to mainly hire female barbers. It has done volumes for my business, mainly because my clients love how my barbers handle their head. It's something that I didn't even notice until I sat in my main barber, my master barber, Kenchi, until I sat in her chair. I never really realized the time that needed to be taken, or how subtle and soft that you could handle someone's head. Kind of when you're in the black barbershop, well, obviously it's still a black barbershop, but when you're in the local barbershops like the ones around here, they're kind of like, mushing your head, pushing you back, and it's very like kind of, I don't care, let's get this over with kind of thing. Whereas with women, as we know, they're nurturing, and it's a beautiful thing. So I think that's great advice as far as finding a woman barber, even if she can't necessarily handle you. I think that the conversation may be a bit easier just to say, hey, do you know anyone who's good with my texture of hair? You'd be surprised how many barbers know each other. And you'll see like on Instagram, they follow each other because they're kind of, the networking it never stops. So it really never hurts to ask. I think that's the biggest question, is just asking, really.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Kadeem. And Davin says thank you too in the chat. He has some tips to go home with. I'm not seeing any other questions right now in the Q&A section of the chat, so I'm just going to kind of ask you all a follow-up question and just wait and see if anybody else wants to share another question before we conclude. But I guess my question for both you all is that we've talked about a lot of things that we think can happen to change barbershops, things that can happen to make them feel more inclusive and feel more positive to a diverse communities, going forward into the future. And I was wondering if there was any sort of positive stimuli or any one particular detail that you all feel like you recognize within traditional barbershops, like the ones you grew up in, that you feel like should also be taken forward within the barbershops that we're imagining here that can be more inclusive to everyone? Is there just one positive stimuli, or maybe there's multiple, but one positive stimuli that can go forward from the traditional to the future?
I think there's a few different things that could happen. I don't know. It's maybe you'd have a better idea, Kadeem, but I liked hearing you say that more barbers might know each other than we might think in terms of their own, like your own community amongst each other. And I think that gives me a little bit more hope that there's somebody everywhere that is at least kind of connected to somebody else, and maybe if these types of conversations could even happen behind the scenes amongst that group of people at that level, instead of it just having to be, this kind of thing that's happening outside of these spaces. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think, like I said earlier, not a code of conduct, but like a pledge or something like that. I really do think that those types of things make a huge difference. Especially, maybe not, it maybe doesn't matter as much in larger cities, but I do think in smaller towns or in, places where there's not as much diversity in general, saying outwardly that we welcome all, I think makes a huge difference in terms of like who feels comfortable entering into that space, and even going in to ask the question of who can cut my hair. Like, I think that like getting people to even walk through the door, I think is a huge thing.
Okay. Thanks so much, Devin.
I would definitely agree with Devin on that. He is right though. It does depend on which city you're in. A place like New York, it's awkward. We do have a lot of those rainbow flags outside, or we welcome all. We have a lot of those. But to be honest, those signs and those, open door policies are normally outside of white barbershops for the most part. A lot of Black barbershops are afraid to have that sort of representation, just because they're very afraid of what it may represent for them or what it may look like to them. Again, New York is an interesting place. Just to share just how different it is from small cities. Sure. I obviously, we've been kind of campaigning ourselves as a barbershop for the queer community. And it's had its upside. We've had a lot of media coverage, all kinds. But as of recent, just want to show like the downside to that here. As kind of a result of being in the media so much, recently we just got a third letter. This one was a little bit more threatening than the last two. Yeah, they threatened to bomb us, put graffiti all over the place. It was a pretty long letter saying some pretty terrible things. So I think I just say that to say, like, it really does depend where you are. The kind of the route and the approach has to be very different. As far as where you are. New York, I have no idea what the solution is, I will tell you. New York is the only thing that I know, so that's kind of the only thing that I could probably give my stamp on, because again, I think it's way easier in a small town. Or it may not be easier because, a small town, sometimes there's small ideas. So,
Yeah.
I think it's like a very touch and go. It's very sensitive, especially in New York, because we are in kind of a sensitive part of, Brooklyn. Again, I'm down the block from the barbershop that I went to my whole life. And so in a sense, I'm still around those same people. I'm still walking past these same people to go to work every day. And it is kind of difficult. Again, all I can say is really conversation. Conversation gets it started. But even for conversation to happen, I will say people need to be open to a conversation, honestly. They have to know that there are ideas outside of what is in their head or what they traditionally know. And that is the tough part. Just kind of even getting people to listen. So listen.
Okay, but it's worth a shot, right? It's worth trying. Absolutely. Thank you, Kadeem. I'm just going to look here. Oh, we do have another question. This one's from Lee. Well, you can go into the chat, and it's someone that's sharing more information about Devin's barbershop culture project, sorry, and that kind of continue from this, the essence of this panel discussions combo. And it's just like a document, I guess, talking about manscaping.
So it's a documentary that's being made. So yeah,
okay.
It's a documentary being made. Yeah, and highly. Yeah, they're working on a documentary actually all about haircuts and masculinity, and so it's called Manscaping. And you can find out more information about that at manscapingmovie.com.
Okay. Thanks so much, Devin, and thanks, Lee, as well, for sharing that in the chat. I think we're getting close to time, and I'm not seeing any new questions in the Q&A, so I am going to just move us forward to our sort of final thoughts and reflections. And I just wanted to say to both of you, just thank you so much for sharing this information today and even being part of this discussion. Being myself being a person of mixed race and being within the sort of masculine spaces of barbershops growing up, and you kind of wonder whether these spaces are even being questioned by anybody else. So I feel like the sort of energy and the conversation coming from our panel discussion tonight kind of shows that this isn't just people aren't isolated in thinking that barbershops can transform and move forward and be more inclusive, that there's lots of great people on the ground who are also exploring this within different projects and with different community activities. So I just want to thank you both again for doing the work that you're doing, and just give you all both a moment if you had any sort of final thoughts or reflections that you wanted to share with everybody. Please go ahead and share them now.
I think I'm good.
Perfect.
Also,
right.
Devin, what I will say, sorry, I just wanted to say that your work is beautiful. Like,
thank you. Thank you.
I have so much inspiration for my next shop. I'm so sorry, but that just inspired
No, thank you.
I am just in love. I will probably contact you if you are selling
definitely.
any paint, because that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right.
All right. Thank you both for the terrific conversation. I'm just going to go ahead and make maybe a quick announcement about some upcoming projects, or not upcoming projects, upcoming talks that are also connected to the Textures exhibition, things that people can register to as well. First, we have April Bay's artist talk coming up, which is about the millennial natural hair movement, and that will be on March 22nd. And then we also have the Textures virtual symposium, which will be happening in April. And there is a slide up now showing these list of different events that are attached to the Textures exhibition. So if you want to take a screenshot, you can. Or if there's different links as well for things in the chat, you can also, for like the thing that Lee shared earlier with the upcoming documentary that Devin's a part of or associated with, you can copy that link now. And thank you all. Thank you everyone for listening in and being a part of this discussion. It's been fantastic. And we loved having you all here and joining us and kind of really thinking and imagining how barbershops can evolve into the future. And again, I want to say thank you to both of our panelists tonight. And also thank you to Steve Gills for sharing the video in the beginning. All right.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody. Yeah. Good night, everybody.